Right, I've got a question. Right, Loco, have you ever met Crash? Were you friends with him in any way?
No, I haven't met
trivia we need to know about this?
No.
Right, do you remember him as a player though, back when he used to play in Korea?
Not really. I honestly, he wasn't like a really big name, so nothing really stands out for me.
I'm not actually that surprised. I can realize a lot of the Koreans that didn't make it in LCK went to other regions. Obviously, LPL was littered with them, even in some of the lower teams. I'm not really that surprised, actually, that this guy is one of the people who went kind of as a nomad around the regions, though. Because to be fair, he was like an aggro jungler who played like the carry jungle champion. So if you're going to go in a region where they're not going to speak Korean, I think you want a jungler who's going to be like the carry type jungler. So should we expect to see that type of Crash, Jensen?
Oh, wait. Can I add one trivia, actually, for that? So in terms of Korean players moving over to other regions and why it's been happening so heavily for the non-minor regions, or kind of the minor regions and the non-major regions, like NA in Europe, after Lustboy kind of happened, and then the other imports started flooding in, the big teams could easily reach out to the top tier Koreans, from NA in Europe and also China, obviously. But in Korea, agencies started being a really big thing. People were oh man, people want to hire Koreans, so we should start agencies. So there's in North America, there aren't that many agencies. I could name the 2 or 3 that are the biggest and that hold most of the players. But in Korea, there's several. There's 7, and all they do is they try to connect teams to all these lower region, the players that don't make it.
It's a little cottage industry, basically. It's sprung up to sell these players who have if they're known at all. If you're an LCK, you can basically get a job in Turkish League, Vietnam, whatever country it might be. In fact, back in the day, it used to just basically be people's brother or something, or uncle would be the one doing this. Because the joke back in the day was you could tell if someone was an absolute noob in the West as a general manager. If they came to you and you saw that they'd had a chat with that one guy who kept trying to sell every single person Nara Kyle, the guy who just played Jace mid or something. I can't remember what champion it was, but there was one guy, a one trick that everyone kept trying to sell to the West, because obviously people would get a finder's fee, if you sell this player or whatever. So because the sad thing about that, I have to say, is I actually feel bad for those Koreans, because this is where people don't know the unglamorous side of being a Korean esports pro, which is because very, very likely to get as good as you had to get, even maybe before you turned pro, you probably had to give up a lot of your schoolwork. In fact, some of them just outright quit school to become semi-pro or pro in any level. The sad thing is, when they don't make it at LCK level, it's not like LCS where, there's some players who quit LCS and just went and had a life, Some of them just went back to school, went back and got a job. The sad thing is, most of them, because they've kind of all in on esports and League of Legends specifically, they'll just keep playing. And so just as in StarCraft to this day, there are still players who are playing for tiny little European teams you'd have never heard of, but who were championship players in the past. In the same way, if you go to a lot of the regions in League of Legends, people would be shocked. Even the Japanese league has Korean players. That's how ridiculous. They're literally basically the main import to every region in the world. So it's kind of on the one hand, it's cool that they get to have a career still, but I always feel so bad for the guys who are just grinding out in Turkey, who are basically the problem is, it's the sort of person you almost want to take to one side and say unless you're really enjoying this right now, it's never going to get better, mate. You're probably never going to get into a top Korean team. You're probably never going to make it. Sorry, if this, the point is, if they can enjoy their everyday life, cool, do it. But if they still think that this is part of the dream of, making it, it's you've kind of lost your chance, I'm afraid. It's very unlikely you'll make it back. Put it this way, the examples Crown, who really did come back from the wilderness, very, very rare. That is so rare that ever happens.
There's Snowflower, Snowflower is one. There just isn't a lot, and Turkey's actually not that bad of a region because their league is supreme from what I heard, and then you get paid so much in Turkey comparatively to the other minor regions. But yeah, the players that are playing in Japan or other Southern Eastern Asian leagues, I don't imagine they get paid pretty much anything.
Actually, I have no idea, because I think the way that things in Turkey are set up, I mean, this is just seeing the kind of bullshit that Turkish teams pull in scrims and stuff like that. Now that I'm in Europe, it actually makes me wonder how those Koreans are being treated there as well. Because I know the Turkish fans is extremely savage, and the way the players behave sometimes. Hearing some of these stories is just so insane. It's just so insane that the way that they treat these import players, even though it's the import players who's usually carrying their assets and stuff like that.
Sure.
I was with the academy team for Spice for a period of time, and then we were scrimming these Turkish teams, and then they're telling us that we won they start chatting in all chats saying that they want new Koreans and stuff like that because they were getting trashed so badly they wanted to cancel the scrim and stuff. So
Wow.
I sometimes wonder. You say that that Turkey is a very good place, and I hear about these stories.
Well, they pay well. I'm not saying it's a good place, but I'm saying they pay well.
Sure. Yeah, that goes right. If they do pay, because you're hearing all these stories about Turkey not paying players and stuff like that as well. But I do think that if you have an agency, I hope the agency does set you up with lawyers and stuff like that, that at least make sure that you get something out of these type of scenarios.
Sure.
Right.
That's actually one thing, in Korea, I always wondered about Loco. That also made me so suspicious. So, back in the StarCraft days, for people who don't know, even back, we're talking in like 2006, 2000, and that kind of era onwards, Koreans used to literally publish how much the salaries of the top players in StarCraft were. And so from that era on, the top players were all listed publicly as making like $300,000 a year, $500,000 a year. Like some of them were, I think the highest was maybe like $700,000, something crazy like that, right? One reason I always was a bit suspicious about how big esports actually was in Korea, because they always wanted to give off the perception it was huge, is you almost never, ever, ever, ever heard a story of a player actually having like legal battle against his team, or legal battle to get out of a contract, or any of that stuff. Like that was just kind of like never even an option for people, as far as I can tell.
Well, there are like I wouldn't say legal battles, but there are like internal conflicts between StarCraft players and their teams. But like when Effort retired, and he wasn't happy with his contract, he said, I'm going to go back into studying. Like I've already won, I beat Flash, like I've done my OSL finals, and I want to go back to studying. Later on, like years after he retired, like 10 years after, he was doing a drinking stream and he got drunk as fuck. And he just started saying, yeah, the CJ head coach was garbage. Like he treated me like shit. Like he's the reason I retired. He's the reason when I came back, I wasn't as good. Like, so after like they all retired and they started streaming, like the truth regarding some of the Korean teams and how they treated them came out. So yes, there weren't like big public legal battles, but when people go back or when people retire and they say they're studying, maybe that's not what happened.
Because that's still the area to this day that most people who are esports pros are the most naive. They act as though like to get any lawyer means you have to pay like a $10,000 retainer. Like you don't. You can get like a top lawyer within the esports field. It might be like a few $100 for a consultation session for an hour. So if you actually have any kind of a problem, it doesn't matter that you might not actually pursue it. Maybe you just want think of the lawyer in that scenario like a doctor. You just go to him like, I've got this problem at the moment. I don't know what to do. Like here's the situation. Within even a 1 hour session, they can probably tell you the basics of like, yeah, there's a case here, do you want to pursue it? In which case it costs this, or you haven't got a case at all, don't worry about it. But it's amazing how many pros, because I get it back in the day when people used to make $20,000 a year. But in the modern day where people are making hundreds and hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, it's amazing like some of the younger pros who just don't even have that in their mind. Because I think if you're going to be a tall pro from day one, you want the proper contracts in place, you want to make sure people are treating you fair, you want to make sure you run down unpaid salaries, you don't want to let these things become a massive problem, especially not when you want to deal with yourself. Because the difference is, if you're a young kid, maybe your manager can lie to you and trick you into thinking what he's doing is right, but the lawyer will just tell you like he has no legal precedent if he's doing something wrong.
So for the younger players, they think the team has their best interests at heart, and they think the team is looking out for them as like number one, and the team is giving them money, the team is giving them a place to live, the team is like providing them with a roster spot. Like they think they're giving them everything, where the team has the team's best interests at heart, and the lawyer will actually have your best interest at heart. And it's really hard to explain that to like a 17 or an 18-year-old, and like the parent kind of has to do it, or like, and also like that's kind of the first person you become in contact with. Like you're at a very, very impressionable age, and if the adult number one you come in contact with is offering you so many things, like why would you go out of your way to like get a lawyer when like, oh man, like they're just gonna take money away, and like I'm very young and very impressionable, and like I'm buying into this like esport thing.
That's why the dirtiest trick always in esports, it still works to this day to some degree, but just not with the massive players because they got so much money they understand now. But it was where what you happen is the person who's your coach now, that used to just be the role of manager, basically. And whoever your manager is, obviously he tries to have a personal bond with you as a player. And the problem is, the more successful you are at doing that, the more you get what you're talking about here, basically, Loco, where the person, because they have a strong bond to that manager, they think of it as like, I have a strong bond to my team care about me. And that's why I've always thought, like, that's the easiest scam in the book, because that guy can then convince that player to do a lot of things that if this was a sports environment, maybe the player would say, fuck that, I'm not being a softball, I'm not doing this sort of thing. And the thing that kills me about that the most is that, like, the most obvious example, whatever, you could have just muted your mic and said to her, like, I'm busy right now, or whatever. I guess you're streaming, so whatever. So the most obvious example of where that's a problem, though, for me, is that people think naively as pros. I am loyal to my team. I shouldn't go and take a different offer because my team needs me. Tell you what, if that team ever gets the chance to upgrade you, like if you're a mid laner and they can get Jensen, they won't have any loyalty to you whatsoever, mate. They'll just they'll dish you out instantly. They only use loyalty to keep you on their team. They use it as a one-way street. So I think pros in general is mad naive about that. That's one of those areas I do actually worry about. Like, these are young, impressionable people who don't have, like, in most scenarios, their parents know nothing about gaming, so they can't help you. So a lot of them are in situations where it's not that they're all going to be abused, but unfortunately, when the business interests are too close to where the player is, it's very, very easy to get caught up in that and get fucked over, basically. Even if it's just on a minor level like this, you were just naive and you trusted the wrong person.